everyone, it's Hayes, and in today's video we're going to be doing something slightly fun. I'm going to having a bit of a rant because now the events of Derision have sunk in and I've watched it a few more times. I'm kind of annoyed now, and we're going to be discussing the destruction of Chloe's character. Now we're not going to look at her the whole way through the show. I'm saving like a more broader look at Chloe until the end of the season when we have a fuller picture, when like we have maybe some conclusion to do with the show. Whether that's going to be a conclusion with Chloe, I don't know, but we're going to have some conclusion, I would assume, where Gabriel and Miraculous is unconcerned at the very least. So it's not a massive big look at her character, just kind of Chloe viewed through the lens after the events of Derision, because like I said, I'm kind of angry now. I want to vent a little bit because oh boy. Anyway, before I go any further, as always, I haven't read the show Bible or seen any of the leaks, so if you already have some extra information about what Chloe is up to for the rest of the season, I'd really like you to keep it to yourself. I want to find out what happens to Chloe when I watch the show, not from someone commenting leaks in my YouTube comment section. And I know a lot of other people watch me because they also feel that way. So if you have read the leaks, seen the leaks, whatever, and already know what happens with Chloe, I'd really appreciate it if you didn't say anything. A lot of people want to experience what happens by watching the show, not through the leaks. So thank you very much. Like I said, want to have a bit of a vent because oh boy. I do feel like in some ways Derision was Thomas Astruc's way of trying to defend Marinette's actions in the show towards Adrian. But that's a different topic for a different day. I feel like in other ways though, kind of like I feel like 50% of the purpose of the episode was this is why Marinette is the way she is towards Adrian. I kind of feel like that was like half of the message. But I feel like the other 50% was more of Thomas Astruc saying, haha, Chloe isn't getting a redemption arc, not now, not ever, so stop asking me all the time, it's not happening, screw you. It's not gonna happen, stop asking, just forget about it. And I feel like what happened with Chloe was literally like a character assassination. Now I don't mean this like by the definition. So character assassination is defined as the malicious and unjustified harming of a person's good reputation. I quite clearly don't mean that. I mean this more like literally a character being, you know, assassinated. Character assassination. Like character assassination is usually when you have someone who's a good person and for whatever reason they are slandered and made out to be a horrible person when they're not. I don't mean it like that. I mean it as in like a character literally, in this case Chloe, literally being assassinated, to be honest. Like it's been no secret in the fandom that Thomas Astruc hates her. I think everyone is aware of this. And while I do think it's a bit odd that people say a writer shouldn't hate their characters, I'm like, why not? Why can't we? I don't like all of mine. If you didn't know, I'm a professional writer as well. I don't like all of my characters. You don't have to. It's not a legal requirement of being a writer. You definitely don't have to. And I feel like it is like helpful sometimes when there's one of the characters you don't like who is also on the bad side or whatever, as the antagonist or one of the antagonists. If you don't like them, you don't want them to do good things. I feel like in some ways it can help. Not always, definitely, as with the case of Chloe we're going to discuss in this video. But like I do feel like sometimes it can help. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to dislike one of or some of your characters. I think that's pretty normal, to be honest. So like I said, no secret he dislikes her, and when people ask him about Chloe's redemption he's like, nope, it ain't happening, she had a chance and she blew it, in like season 2, season 3 kind of thing. And after Derision, no matter your opinion on Chloe, love her or hate her, I think we can all collectively agree that what she did in the flashback, which she did to Marinette, was horrible. Okay, I'm not trying to pretend it was okay with this video. I know it wasn't. It was absolutely disgusting. I hated it. Like if you saw my Derision reaction, I just get so sad watching it happen. I was sad in the Derision commentary because I just finished watching the episode twice and I was like, oh, I was just so sad, and I still am every single time I've rewatched the episode since. However, my kind of problem with this episode is basically it's very clear that this episode was not planned from the start. They've waited 5 seasons to tell us this with 0 hints at all. And okay, like we already knew that Chloe had bullied Marinette in the past. As she said in Origins, like, oh, I'm fed up with Chloe's bullying and stuff. But the way it was, you know, portrayed throughout this whole show, it was like, it was just like petty stuff like name calling, and don't get me wrong, name calling can still hurt and can lead to bigger things. Like maybe it did start as Chloe name calling Marinette and then it escalated and ended up what we saw in Derision in the flashback. And whilst those both things can hurt, there is a big difference between someone bullying you by name calling and bullying you by what Chloe did in Derision. So we all knew that Chloe bullied her, but not to this extent. And in the episode Maledictator, Chloe, if you remember, is going to leave to America, and as soon as the class find out, they are so happy when they find out Chloe is going to leave. And then Adrian arrives at school and he's like, hey, what's going on? And Marinette's like, oh my god, Chloe is leaving. And he's like, why are we having a party? That's sad. Like, one of our friends is leaving, isn't that sad? And Marinette starts to feel really guilty for feeling relieved that this girl who basically tried to kill her is now finally not only leaving the school but also leaving the country. I can't imagine how much safer she'd feel, you know, if she found that out. And Marinette ends up apologising to him. But no one at any point, Marinette or the other students who are still in the class, like Milan, Max, whatever, who were present at the time, turn around and say, hey Adrian, actually Chloe did this absolutely awful thing last year. Marinette apologises to Adrian and he's sad and kind of gets Chloe to stay. And like, that was the perfect opportunity to tell him. That's why it's kind of annoying to me, because this having no hints at before, like in Maledictator, which was when the perfect opportunity was to do this, because there were no hints before, I just feel like it opens massive plot holes, because it makes Adrian look like an apologist for all of Chloe's bad actions up until the end of Derision, when he like finally like cuts her off as a friend or whatever. Like, why hasn't Marinette or Rose or Julika or Max or Milan or Nathaniel, why have none of them said a single thing to him about it? Like, now I know I'm 26, it's been a while since I've been to high school, but like, I can't imagine they're much different when I was there, because when someone new joined our school, they'd be caught up on 3 years worth of gossip in like within a week. We told them everything, okay? Nothing was secret. It's like, you're new here? This is what you need to know to survive in this high school. Okay, and I know that's not just because I went to school with a load of attention seekers who just like to gossip all the time. Although, if that's the case, I think it definitely explains a lot about my personality now. But that's just the way teenagers are, especially when you're with someone in such a close environment all the time. Like, school in England, at the very least, is 5 days a week. My school started at like 10 to 9, we were there till 3:30. We were there quite a long time, for 5 years, that's how long high school is in this country, with each other, in each other's business. You know, like, it's just kind of like the nature of being at school, and just like the nature of people in general. People gossip, and no one thought to tell Adrian, or to that extent, even Alia. Alia was also new in Origins, she was new to the school, and no one said a single thing to her either. I don't think either of them know. So Maledictator was the perfect place to say to Adrian, oh, actually she's bullied most of us, nearly killed Marinette once just because, and also blackmails all the teachers to get away with it. Like, it's a relief she's going to be leaving. And if Adrian's response in that moment wasn't like, okay, fair enough, there would be something up, you know? Like, so why didn't they tell him then? Like I said, it's a perfect opportunity. And I just feel like Thomas's hatred towards Chloe has now created a mass of plot holes in the show. So like I said before, it's pretty clear that this episode has not been planned since the start, and I feel like a lot of you are going to say, well, Hayes, at first when you get 1 season, then got sent to 3, and then to 5, then to 7, then to 8, and maybe 42 by the end of next year, who knows. However, usually when you write, it's just my perspective as a writer and how I was trained to do it, even if it doesn't end up coming up in the piece you're writing, you will often like write, or at the very least think, of your character's backstory, what's happened to them, what has shaped them to become who they are. So they have this excuse in Derision that the reason Marinette is kind of weird around Adrian and stalks him, it's not actually stalking since he doesn't feel that he's being persecuted or whatever, but let's just go with the word stalks for now. So he already had like this episode kind of seemingly planned to excuse all of Marinette's behaviour, but there was never any hints of what had happened exactly. Does that make sense? Like, so when you create a character, you often give them a backstory to help flesh them out. A lot of the time, often that backstory is never heard by the reader because it's not important to the story, or at least not important to the story at the start. And if it's relevant, it will often come up, but oftentimes it never gets mentioned. However, it gives the impression to the reader that they're a more well-rounded character if the author knows, even if they never say, if the author, or the writer in this case, because Thomas Astruck, I believe, isn't an author, just by giving that character backstory, even if they never find out, that backstory having shaped that character makes them more well-rounded and more realistic and more believable for the reader. So it seems that, like, because they chose for Marinette to act like this towards Adrian from the start of the show, really. Since Origins, she's kind of been like this with Adrian. She only kind of really stopped this season, to be honest. It seems like they already kind of knew that, so they already kind of knew about Chloe, but also decided never to hint at it. Like I said, it's not clear in Origins at all. When Marinette says she's talking to her mum in the morning about how lucky she's been to be in the same class as Chloe for however many years running now. Is it like 3 years, 4 years? I'm not even sure exactly. So like, it's clear Chloe did something, but with the way Marinette is acting, she's like kind of fed up. She's not traumatized to the point she's getting panic attacks about it. She's just like, I can't be bothered dealing with Chloe this year.
I bet you anything Chloe will be in my class again. 4 years in a row? Is that possible? Definitely. Lucky me.
Don't say that. It's the start of a new year. I'm sure everything will be just fine.
So we find out at the end of the flashback in Derision when Soculine is expelled from the school. Well, she's technically suspended, but basically means she's finished and there's only 2 weeks left. There are 2 weeks left at school from the end of the school year. So it's the Derision flashback, 2 weeks, the whole of the summer holidays, and then Origins. So that's like roughly about 2 months away from Chloe. Marinette and Chloe are away from each other for 2 months. And I would argue that Marinette, not that I'd want to see it, but I would argue that Marinette should hold some trauma around walking back into school. But if you go back and watch Origins, she's pretty happy to be back there. Of course, at the first she doesn't know Chloe's going to be in her class again, but even when she finds out Chloe is, she's kind of like, okay, whatever. She's not traumatised by it, and not that I want to see, obviously I love Marinette, I don't want to see her be traumatised or whatever, that was horrible in Derision watching that, but like, she should be traumatised to some extent. And especially since the school is an environment directly related to her trauma. But even when Chloe is in her class again, like, she's fine. Like, Marinette could have drowned as a direct result of Chloe's actions. The sight of Chloe should induce a panic attack. I know with my own anxiety, I have really bad anxiety. I also have panic disorder because of the sheer volume of panic attacks I often get. Like, this morning I'm feeling anxious, I got PhD supervision later. Like, not that anything ever bad has happened at PhD supervision, it's those meetings just make me really, really, really anxious. I was feeling sick this morning, it was horrible. I don't enjoy supervision, and whilst I wouldn't say I have trauma associated with supervision, it is something that every single time induces anxiety. Even though I know at the end of each supervision, you know, it's going to be okay, my supervisors are there to help me improve my thesis so I get a really good mark at the end. Whilst I get that, I'm still not able to see past it, and every single day, like the morning of my supervision, the day before, I feel so ill, basically, because of how nervous I am. So when I walk into the university, because that's the environment where my anxiety happens, in my supervisor's office, during the appointment, those are all the things that make me anxious, and I start nearly having a panic attack during the meetings. So really the sight of Chloe should induce a panic attack. And really the same with Kim. Even though I feel like Marinette knows he genuinely thought it was a joke, it's still horrible, and really the sight of him should cause her to panic. Yet in Dark Cupid in the first season, which is not long after this happened in Derision, like I said, the flashback in Derision is set at the end of the school year. She helps him confess his feelings to someone in Dark Cupid a few months later. Like, if I was Marinette and this has happened to me, I don't think I could even talk to Kim again, you know what I mean? Like, why also would you let him continue to use a Miraculous after this? Like, fair enough, Master Fu gave it to him first, he didn't know what had happened. Fair enough. But if at that point when Ladybug went to collect it later, I would have been like, this is the first and last time after what you did. No way in hell are you using this again. No thank you, goodbye. And also what I was saying about the environment of the school, Marinette should also really be pretty scared of the pool. Yeah, in the episode Siren, she goes in, no problem. A Gang of Secrets, no problem. Mr. Pigeon 72, no problem. Which is just absolutely bizarre considering when Marinette falls in the pool, she falls in not that dissimilar of a way, and she's having the time of her life. She's smiling. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense. Events, environments, and people related to the trauma are what causes stuff like panic attacks. So yes, I understand the reason when she was at the pool in Derision was for a date, same as in the flashback. It was arguably also a date with Kim, even though Kim didn't really seem to know it at the time. So I can understand why she gets panicked because it's a date. But she has no panic around Chloe, ever. No panic around Kim, ever. And no panic around the pool, really, ever. It really seems like all the trauma in this episode is more due to her date with Adrian and because Kim happens to be there. But in the same vein, Kim has been around for all these other times Marinette has tried to be with Adrian and it hasn't caused a problem before. And it just seems odd because I would really argue that the environment of where it happened and the people who caused it were far more significant to Marinette in the panic she felt in Derision. Like the flashback that she kept getting before the actual flashback started, where it was like the blurry image, it was of her locker and like the cockroaches. So like places like the school and the locker room and what Chloe and Sabrina did should induce panic in Marinette. And really the only way to explain this away and for it not to be a plot hole is repression. And repression is basically when you try to repress a memory. You basically force your brain to try and forget something, which by the way, please don't do that. That is extremely bad for your mental health. Please do not try to repress anything. I understand some memories aren't very nice, but it's really not good for you. That's the only way to explain it. Because Marinette walking back into school in Origins should still be traumatized. She should be traumatized at the sight of Chloe and Kim and still panic and be nervous around them. But she's not. She's completely fine. And another plot hole that really annoys me is with Soculine. So in my Defense of Marinette video, there's a section where people were accusing her of being a bad friend, and I was like, no, she's not. But this episode, because it wasn't planned, sure as hell makes her look like a bad friend. Like, so this girl, Soculine, basically got thrown out of school for you, okay? And as we know, we're getting towards the end of the school year. In Revelation, Lila says, we have 2 weeks left to go. Derision, that flashback, there are also 2 weeks left to go. So it's all been like a whole school year in almost by the time we get to Jubilation, where Marinette goes to see Soculine, presumably for the first time, in almost a whole year. This girl got thrown out of school for you, and you don't go and speak to her to a whole year? Like, I understand. We've all got things going on. Soculine seems pretty busy, high school seems like it's really busy, she's also helping run the shop. I think she also did, was it gymnastics and taekwondo, and she likes to moonlight as a fake ladybug upon occasion. And of course Marinette is Ladybug, and she's also had, you know, 2 boyfriends. She's pretty busy, but she still has all the time in the show to go out and hang out with her friends despite all these extra responsibilities. But she couldn't go once and see her friend who they seem to be really close and also got thrown out of school for her. It makes her look terrible. Like, so she has the time to hang out with her friends still in school and to date Luca briefly and also Adrian, but she doesn't have the time to go and see this girl who practically almost kind of saved her life. Like, she protected Marinette and comforted her when she was traumatized, and then she got thrown out of school for her. And then Soculine is never seen again. Like I said, it's really infuriating a lot of the plot holes this creates, because I feel like it's been done by Thomas and the rest of the team of writers due to Thomas's hatred of Chloe, and it's just made a lot of other things not make sense. And like, again with Soculine, I really like her now. I didn't really have much of an opinion on her in Jubilation, but I really like her now. But Soculine and Alia, they're actually basically the same character. There are some differences, don't get me wrong, but if Soculine had been in the show from the start, I don't think we actually would have needed Alia, which is a shame because I absolutely love Alia as well. But they are very, very similar, and if Alia was going to continue to be in it, I think she would have to have changed quite a bit. Like, usually there is usually like a journalist in a lot of superhero story. It's like a superhero story trope, so I get that. But just in terms of personality, they're largely the same girl. So like, why did they also choose to make Soculine pretty much the same as Alia? It's just odd. So like I said, it's clear that this episode was definitely not planned, from the start of the show, and I understand it's hard, like I said before, with the way the show has been extended, but I do feel like the very existence of this episode makes the show lose some credibility in its storytelling ability. Like, as soon as they knew they were going to have 5 seasons and they knew this episode was going to happen, they really needed to start leaving some hints, doing some foreshadowing. Even if they only knew about this from season 5, like from the start when they started planning it out. Like, they really should have left some hints, and because they probably couldn't, because they couldn't go back and retcon Marinette's reaction to having Chloe in her class in Origins, because everyone would remember, they could have just done it in a different way if they really wanted to have this episode. So I think this episode equally would have worked just as well if Marinette and Adrien went on a date to the pool. Marinette gets anxious because she is Marinette and gets anxious around Adrien, it's their first proper date, but Kim is there and makes fun of Marinette for getting anxious, and perhaps Chloe asked Kim to do that, which I don't think is that far-fetched considering how ridiculous Chloe thought the relationship was in Deflagration during the cafeteria scene. Adrien tells Kim off for what he says to Marinette. Angry, Kim gets akumatized, the Akuma fight is still the same, and after the Akuma, Kim tells him that Chloe asked him to do it, which is, like I said, not too far-fetched like Deflagration. Adrien goes to confront Chloe and the episode has the same conclusion and the same message, but like it doesn't completely like mess up basically the rest of the show and how traumatized Marinette should be. First of all, of going to school, second of all, going to the pool, thirdly, seeing Chloe, fourthly, seeing Kim, and also fifth, her friendship with Sokuling, because it just looks odd that this girl who got thrown out of school for her, Marinette couldn't be bothered to go and see her for almost a whole year. So they really needed to have mentioned it once or twice, basically in Origins, but since they can't go back and change it for that reason, I either don't think they should have done this episode at all or done it differently, because one thing I did love about this episode was the representation of anxiety. As I said before in this video and as I've said in other videos, I have anxiety as well, so I loved it for that. But like, a lot of this episode, now I've had more chance to digest it, just doesn't fit and just doesn't make sense. And also, what Chloe did, I would argue, like in the flashback I mean, I would argue it's not even in keeping with her character. Like, she's never been my favourite, but I would argue her behaviour in the flashback in Derision is really out of character. Chloe has learnt this bullying behaviour from her mother, who puts people down, including her own daughters, she says it's Chloe and to Zoe. And as far as I'm aware, Audrey hasn't tried to drown someone, nor has Chloe, as far as we're aware, like I said, tried to do this since or before. Maybe she has, but not that we know of. And I just feel like it's extremely out of character for her. Like, I think I said this, I don't know what video it was in, was it maybe the Zoe video? I think so, the In Defense of Zoe video, is that Chloe is kind of like the Draco Malfoy of Miraculous. Draco in Harry Potter isn't always the nicest person in the earlier films. He is a bully. However, he kind of starts to like get phased out of Harry Potter during the later books and films because Voldemort becomes a bigger threat, and Harry, Hermione and Ron have no time to deal with this petty school bully. He can go off and bully someone else, not them, they don't care about him. It's the same that's happening with Chloe. She's just like a petty school bully, and she's kind of getting slightly written out of the show because Gabriel Babes, he's getting a lot more powerful and stuff, and Lila's also getting more threatening, whereas Chloe, at the minute anyway, really isn't. So it just seems really out of character for her to do this because she's a petty bully. She's not a criminal mastermind who tries to drown her classmates. Like, don't get me wrong, Chloe has done bad things, but I still believe that she's not a bad person, which again I think is a really big plot hole, and not just where Derision is concerned, but Chloe more in general. Like, we found out the way her mum has been treating her, and that's basically where Chloe has learned all behaviour from. And it just makes me feel sorry for Chloe. Like, if they never wanted us to feel sympathy for her, they never should have given us a backstory to why Chloe is the way she is. Like, I don't have any sympathy whatsoever for Lila, because right now, as of filming this video, I have no idea why Lila acts the way she does. But I understand why Chloe acts the way she does. And to some extent, I have a lot of sympathy with Gabriel as well. Even though I do think he's a bad person and the way he's going about this is horrible, at the very least I understand why he's doing it, and I think he has a great motivation for doing what he's doing. Is he doing it in the best way possible? No, of course not. but I do to some extent feel bad for him, and I feel bad for Chloe, but I don't feel bad for Lila because I've no idea why Lila's doing this. Lila just looks like evil to me, and I'm like, Lila, you weirdo, stop! However, we've been told quite categorically that Chloe has been abused by her mother, and I know Thomas Astor keeps saying no, she wasn't abused. Yes, she was abused. Like, it's emotional abuse, that's still abuse. Chloe has been abused by her mother, and of course, as Milen says in Derision, that doesn't make it okay to act that way. I'm not pretending it does, of course it's not. But at the very least, I understand why Chloe is the way she is. And just at this point after Derision, I'm not even confident that there's like a way back for her anymore, which to some extent I really feel was intentional. Thomas doesn't like her, and I'm like, at this point, even though I'm kind of gonna miss her, like I said, she's not my favourite, but I feel like Miraculous isn't Miraculous without Chloe. She's just like a quintessential part of it. I just feel like maybe to some extent it might be better to remove her from the show because this is just getting ridiculous.
Utterly ridiculous!
Because the hatred Thomas Astor and maybe other members of the writing team feel towards Chloe is having a really detrimental effect on not only how Chloe is being written, but like the show as a whole, because Derision, with the way it was done, has created loads of plot holes everywhere. And like, don't get me wrong, of course a character can do bad things, but when it's done to fuel how the writer feels about that character, it ends up creating a lot of plot holes and negatively affecting the overall storytelling of a TV show. It should not be done. Like I said before, I gave my example of how Derision could be done. That would still end up with Chloe in the same position, but at very least it would be in keeping with her character. I don't think it's that far-fetched to have like Chloe find out that Adrian and Marinette are going on the pool to a date, so she's like, hey Kim, do you think you could maybe go to the pool on the same day, wind Marinette up a bit? That still ends up with Adrian telling Kim off, Kim getting angry, Kim getting akumatized, Kim telling them at the end, oh, Chloe asked me to do it, then Adrian going to confront Chloe at the end, and we could still look at Marinette's anxiety. But it's keeping everybody in character and not creating a massive load of plot holes with, for example, Soculine, with, for example, the trauma Marinette doesn't seem to really possess. It just kind of crops up out of nowhere in Derision. And don't get me wrong, I understand that trauma, like, there's not a way to control it, it just happens whenever. But for it to not happen for almost a whole school year until this one time you went on a date to the pool just seems, in terms of storytelling, just seems a bit silly, really. So I get it's hard because of the way Miraculous has been extended, and when Miraculous first was a thing, this episode was probably never planned out. But when you create characters as a writer, it's always for the best to fully flesh out and write a backstory to your characters and talk about the reasons why they are the way they are now. You know, because like, even the excuses for Marinette's behaviour don't even really make sense, because like, okay, yeah, one of the things she said is that I don't want them to be friends with Chloe. The next guy I like, they can't be friends with Chloe, which is why she's so against Adrian when he arrives in Origins, because Chloe's like, my best friend Adrian is starting at school today. And Marinette's like, oh god, he's going to be awful then if he's your best friend. She doesn't want to know him before she's even met Adrian. But she also says, I need to know all these things about them, I need to know absolutely every single detail. But when she's starting to have feelings for Luca, she doesn't do that. She acts normally around Luca, so even the stuff with that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So this video is in no way trying to write off what Chloe did. What Chloe did in Derision, what we saw, was awful. However, it was extremely out of character for her. I don't actually believe she would do that. I don't think she's the greatest person, but I also don't think she's evil. And secondly, it just creates a load of plot holes around Marinette's non-existent trauma until she goes on this one date, and also makes her look like a terrible friend to Soculine. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say. Like, sometimes when I do my episode commentaries, like, so for Derision, I got up, I did my makeup, did the reaction to the episode, then I rewatched it and I took notes, and then I sat down and filmed. So I don't know, I had probably like start to finish an hour to consider everything before I sat down and filmed the video. And like, even as I'm filming, I think sometimes you can see me like change my mind. Like, sometimes right at the start I'll give it a score out of 10, but by the time I've got to the end of the episode, finished discussing it, sometimes I'll put the score up, sometimes I'll put it down, because talking it through whilst I'm filming helps me consider it a bit more. But now I've been like it's a week after Derision I'm filming this, but I think it'd be a couple of weeks after it by the time you see this video. Like, I'm just kind of annoyed because I'm like, it doesn't actually make any sense. You know what I mean? If you have to basically make a load of plot holes, it really means you shouldn't do this episode in the first place, you know? So anyway, besties, I think that's all I've got to say. Yeah, I'm just kind of disappointed more than anything, actually. Like, I always feel that whilst I am critical of the show, I would say I'm generally more positive about the show than some other people are. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. If you want to criticise the show, you can criticise the show, of course you can. But I do feel for the most part I'm pretty positive and give the show credit where credit is due. But looking back on it, I am actually pretty disappointed in this episode, and I feel like the only thing I liked about it were Marinette's anxiety. I thought it was portrayed really well, coming from someone who also has anxiety. The way Adrian went all out for her in this episode, how Soculine also went all out for her in this episode, and also how Marinette was like, yeah, I have Adrian, we can do this together. But like, I also need to do this on my own. It wasn't just completely okay because now she had a boyfriend or whatever. I think the rest of it with the flashback and how Chloe's behaviour was handled was just not good. And like I said, I just feel like the hatred for Chloe in the Miraculous writing room has fueled a lot of bad decisions and negatively affected not only Derision but the larger storytelling of Miraculous in general. So anyway, besties, I'd love to know how you think about my thoughts. Do you think I'm completely wrong, that Marinette shouldn't have been traumatised, or whatever? I don't know. Like I said, I was kind of angry, but I was trying to play it up as more of like, oh, this is kind of funny, but also really not. But anyway, besties, I'd love to know what you all think, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!